It was just another Tuesday night, or so I thought. I was walking home from my late shift at the library, the kind of quiet, uneventful walk I'd taken hundreds of times before. The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows, and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. I had my headphones in, listening to some calming instrumental music, completely lost in my own world. That's when I first saw him. He was standing under a flickering streetlight about a block ahead, just standing there. It wasn't that unusual. People wait for buses or friends all the time. But there was something off about the way he stood, perfectly still, like a statue. As I got closer, I noticed he was wearing an old-fashioned suit, the kind you see in black and white movies. It looked out of place in our modern casual neighborhood. I picked up my pace a little, a slight unease creeping into my thoughts. As I passed him, I instinctively glanced over. He didn't turn his head, but I felt his gaze on me. It was a heavy, piercing feeling, like he could see right through me. I quickly looked away, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I told myself I was being paranoid, just tired from a long day. I continued walking, trying to shake off the weird feeling. After about half a block, I dared to look back. My heart leaped into my throat. He was gone, vanished. The spot under the streetlight was empty. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. See? Just my imagination getting the best of me. I turned the corner onto my street, fumbling in my bag for my keys. The familiar sight of my apartment building should have been comforting, but the sense of being watched was stronger than ever. I looked up, and there he was again. Standing across the street, directly opposite my building, under another streetlight. Still in that old suit, still perfectly motionless. This time, there was no denying it. It wasn't a coincidence. How did he get there so fast without making a sound? My street is a dead end for cars, and I would have heard footsteps. Panic began to set in. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely get the key into the lock. I didn't dare look back again. I just scrambled inside, slammed the door, and triple-locked it. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. I raced to the window, my curiosity battling my fear. I peeked through the blinds, my breath fogging up the cold glass. He was still there, across the street. But this time, he was looking directly up at my window. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light. It was just a pale, featureless oval. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he was looking right at me. I stumbled back from the window, my back hitting the wall. I stayed there for what felt like hours, too scared to move, too scared to look again. Who was he? What did he want? The questions swirled in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. Eventually, exhaustion won out over fear, and I fell into a restless sleep on the couch. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the window. For a moment, I thought it was all a terrible nightmare. But the memory of that still figure and his piercing gaze was all too real. I crept back to the window and cautiously looked out. The street was empty. He was gone. Life seemed to be going on as normal people walking their dogs, cars driving by. I've never seen him again, but I haven't forgotten. Every night when I walk home, I feel a shiver run down my spine. I avoid looking at the streetlights, and I always feel like someone is watching from the shadows. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, and maybe it's better that I don't. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. Stay safe out there. It was just another Tuesday, one of those gray, forgettable days. I was walking home from work, taking my usual shortcut through the old city park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but the park itself was already sinking into twilight. The path was mostly empty. Just a few joggers finishing their laps and a couple walking their dog. I had my headphones in, listening to a podcast, completely lost in my own world. That's when I first saw him. He was sitting on a bench up ahead, perfectly still. At first, he just looked like another person enjoying the last light of day. But as I got closer, something felt off. He was dressed in a dark, old-fashioned suit, the kind you might see in a black and white movie. It looked too warm for the mild evening. His posture was ramrod straight, and he was staring directly at me. Not just looking in my direction, but staring with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I pulled out my earbuds, the sudden silence of the park feeling loud and heavy. The joggers were gone. The couple with the dog had disappeared. It was just me and the man on the bench. I tried to give him a polite, "Hey, I'm just passing through" kind of nod, but he didn't react. His eyes, even from a distance, seemed to hold no expression at all. They were just fixed on me. I picked up my pace, my heart starting to thump a little faster. It's just a weird guy, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. I walked past his bench, keeping my eyes forward, resisting the urge to look back. The feeling of his gaze was like a physical weight on my back. I walked faster, my casual stroll turning into a power walk. I could hear my own footsteps echoing on the pavement. I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. He was still there, sitting in the exact same position, still staring. But now, he had a slight smile on his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was thin and cold, and it didn't reach his eyes. That's when real panic started to set in. I broke into a jog, my work bag bouncing awkwardly against my back. The park exit was just ahead, the streetlights beyond it promising safety and normalcy. I didn't dare look back again. I just ran. I burst out of the park and onto the busy street, the sounds of traffic and people a welcome shock to my system. I leaned against a lamppost, catching my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. After a minute, I forced myself to look back toward the park entrance. The path was empty. The bench where he'd been sitting was deserted. It was as if he had never been there at all. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a strange person. Maybe my imagination got the better of me in the fading light. But I couldn't shake the feeling of those empty eyes and that cold, knowing smile. I took a different route home after that day. For weeks, I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see a man in a dark suit standing silently, watching me from a distance. I never saw him again. But sometimes, when I'm walking alone at dusk, I get that same prickly feeling on the back of my neck. And I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, sitting on a park bench, waiting for someone else to walk by. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe for more. I almost didn't include this next account. Not because I doubted it, but because the woman who gave it to me asked me to wait 6 months before using it. I waited 7. Margaret Holt described silence as her job. 14 years as a signals intelligence analyst, first at Fort Meade, then embedded with State, then, for a period she describes only as abroad, undercover, somewhere she still doesn't name. She was good at silence. She trusted it. She understood its textures the way a musician understands rest, not as absence but as information. She retired in 2021, moved to a farmhouse outside Rutland, Vermont, bought the house because of its silence. She meant to live inside it for the rest of her life. The silence in that farmhouse, she told me, lasted 6 weeks. Then it changed. Not obviously, not loudly. The change was structural. The way the silence in an empty house feels different from the silence in a house where someone is waiting for you. Same decibel level. Different texture. Margaret noticed this the way she had been trained to notice things. She noted it, filed it, let it sit. The first physical sign was frost. Not on the windows, on the inside of the windowsills. A thin rime appearing between 2 and 4 in the morning, only on the north-facing windows, only in the 2 rooms she spent the most time in. She checked the insulation. She checked the caulking. She bought a thermometer, placed it on the north sill. At 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, the thermometer read 41 degrees. The thermostat in the room read 68. She held those two numbers in her mind for a long time. The sound started in January. Unlike anything she'd heard described in the news coverage, this wasn't pressure or tone. This was specific. A low, rhythmic ticking, almost biological, as if something large and patient was inside the walls, counting. She didn't call a contractor. She called a former colleague. The colleague came, spent 2 days, found nothing, left looking pale and quiet in a way that Margaret found more alarming than anything else. There are more of these accounts. Stay. On the 3rd week of February, Margaret went downstairs at 2 a.m. because the ticking had moved. It was in the kitchen now, or past the kitchen. It was in the yard. She stood at the kitchen window and looked out into the snow. The yard behind the farmhouse was flat for about 40 feet before it met a line of old maples. The moon was 3/4 full and the snow held light well, and she could see everything clearly. At the edge of the maple line, something was standing in the snow. She described it precisely because precision was her language. It was bipedal, but only technically. It held its weight forward on a spine that bent at the wrong angle so that its chest was parallel to the ground and its head hung down and forward like an animal searching. Its legs were too long below the knee, with an extra articulation she couldn't rationalize, like an insect's leg with one bend too many. Its surface was pale, almost white, but not uniformly. There were darker patches across the upper back and along the outer arms, the texture of something that has been wet and dried many times. And its face, what she could see of it, angled downward, had no distinguishable features except 2 points of reflection, small and widely spaced, that moved independently of each other. It was not looking at the house. It was looking at the snow directly in front of it, with an attention so focused it felt scientific. And around its feet, the snow was wrong, melted in a perfect circle approximately 6 feet in diameter. Despite the temperature being 4 degrees Fahrenheit, Margaret stood at the window for 9 minutes. Then she realized what she was feeling. Not fear. She had expected fear. This was something worse. Recognition. The feeling was the same as the one she'd had her first week on the job. The first time she understood that someone had been listening to her for months before she knew to look. The feeling of being an object of study, of having been categorized. In the morning, she called her former agency. She used a word she'd been told to use if she ever needed immediate response. They came within the hour. They took her notes. They told her the house was fine. She moved in March. She has not slept past 3 a.m. since. I've sat with this next account longer than any other in this collection. The man who experienced it was a 22-year intelligence veteran. He used the word prepared 3 times in his written statement. He was not prepared. The coffee was still hot when Marcus Webb decided he was being followed by something that did not have a body. Not a person, not a drone. Something organized and patient and interested in him specifically, moving through the world in a way that left only residue, a drop temperature here, a wrong sound there, the particular quality of a room that has recently been occupied by something that does not belong in rooms. Marcus was 54. Former CIA station chief, 2 postings in Eastern Europe, 1 in Southeast Asia he never discussed. He'd retired to a narrow brick row house in Pittsburgh's Lawrenceville neighborhood, chose it because it looked like no one would look for anything important there. He ran 3 miles every morning. He made his own bread. He called his daughter on Thursdays. He was the most controlled person he had ever known. The first wrong note was a smell. Not a bad smell. Clean, almost medicinal, the smell of electronics in a cold room, the specific ozone signature of something drawing significant power. It was there when he woke faint, gone before he'd made it downstairs. Back the next morning. Gone again. He replaced the smoke detector. He checked the fuse box. He borrowed a carbon monoxide reader from his neighbor and left it in the bedroom for 4 days. It read 0. The smell came every morning for 11 days. On the 12th day, it came at 2 in the afternoon, stronger, and this time it didn't leave. It filled the back bedroom, the one he used as an office, with a density that made him feel the room had been rearranged while he wasn't looking. He stood in the doorway and cataloged everything. Nothing had moved. But the temperature was wrong. The office was 9 degrees colder than the hallway. He checked the vent. Open, functioning, warm air moving through it. He went and got a second thermometer. The room was 9 degrees colder, with warm air blowing into it. Stay with me. He started sleeping in the living room. He told himself it was a drafting issue in the old house. He had always been good at telling himself things, and he had always known when he was doing it. On the third night in the living room, he woke at 3:40 a.m. to find the smell present there too. And behind it, underneath it, a sound, not the hum that others had described. A clicking. Rapid, dry, almost electronic, like a signal being processed. Like something reading. Marcus sat up. The clicking stopped. He lay back down. The clicking resumed. He sat up again, slowly this time, and turned toward the window. The streetlight outside was off. The whole block was dark. But there was enough ambient light from the city sky that he could see the street. And on the sidewalk directly outside his window, directly outside, no more than 12 feet from where he sat, there was a shape that his mind took 3 full seconds to resolve into anything. It was pressed against the exterior wall of the building across the street, but pressed is the wrong word. Adhered is closer. It was horizontal, its body flush against the brick above the first floor windows. 8 or 9 feet off the ground, its limbs spread and positioned in a way that suggested suction rather than grip. It was large, larger than a person, with a torso that was too wide and too flat, like something designed to occupy a surface rather than move through space. Its head was turned outward, away from the building, facing the street, and it was facing his window. The head was featureless except for a structure along its lower half that was not a mouth, but that opened and closed with the rhythm of the clicking. Slow, deliberate. The clicking was coming from that. Marcus did not move for a very long time. At some point, the clicking stopped. The shape was gone. He filed a full report in the morning. He used the secure channel. He was told his case was being reviewed. He was told that 47 other personnel in a 5-year window had reported similar phenomena in residential settings within the continental United States. He was told that number was classified. He still makes his bread on Sundays. He runs 3 miles. He calls his daughter. He told me he no longer uses the back bedroom. He didn't tell me why. Take a breath. 47 cases. That's the number he was given. I don't know the real number. Tell me in the comments if you're listening from somewhere that used to feel safe. And if you're not subscribed yet, stay. Take a breath. 47 cases. That's the number I was given. I don't know the real number. Let me know in the comments if you're listening from somewhere that used to feel safe. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is a really good time. The youngest person in this collection of accounts was 26. I almost didn't include her story, but I had to, because she was the only one who asked the question nobody else thought to ask. Her name was Priya Naidu, and she was not supposed to be at the November meeting. She was a junior State Department analyst, only 26, just 8 months out of her fellowship. She was still learning the ropes, figuring out which rooms to be seen in and which ones to be invisible in. For this meeting, she was pulled in as a note-taker. She sat quietly against the wall, not at the main table, and she watched everyone with the kind of sharp attention that comes from a lifetime of learning more by observing than by being observed. She took her notes. The meeting wrapped up. She walked back to her desk. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That evening, as she waited for the metro, she noticed her hands were cold. But this was a strange kind of cold. It wasn't because the station was chilly. It was like her hands themselves had become a different temperature from the rest of her body. She pressed them together, but the cold was coming from within them, not from the air around them. She went home, made dinner, and went to sleep, trying to shake off the weird sensation. The next morning, she woke up with a strange fullness in her left ear. It wasn't pain, but a constant pressure, like when you're descending in an airplane and your ears just won't pop. She yawned, hoping to clear it. Nothing. She took a shower, still there. She drove to work, and by noon, the pressure hadn't gone away. She reported it to her supervisor, who sent her to occupational health. There, they asked her a series of questions that felt prepared, like they had been waiting to ask them. Priya was 26 years old. She was perfectly healthy, with no history of ear problems. They referred her up the chain of command immediately. The nights became the hardest part. The pressure in her ear developed a rhythm. It wasn't tinnitus, not a ringing or a ticking. It felt more like a signal trying to connect but constantly losing reception. A sensation of being almost reached. Of something out there, trying to lock onto a frequency it could almost find, but not quite. Now, I really need you to hear this next part. On the fourth night, she woke up suddenly at 2:20 in the morning. Something about the room was not right. It wasn't wrong in a way she could easily point to. It was wrong in the way a familiar photograph feels wrong when you notice something is off about a person's face. The room looked exactly the same as it always did. The furniture was in place, the door was closed, but it felt occupied. It felt like she wasn't alone. Her heart pounding, she reached over and turned on the lamp. Nothing. The room was empty. She sat up in bed, and that's when she saw it. At her window, a window on the fourth floor of her apartment building, facing a sheer brick air shaft with no ledge, no fire escape, nothing to stand on, she saw a face. It wasn't a whole person. Just a face, pressed against the glass, looking in. It was huge, too large to fit entirely within the window frame, so she couldn't see all of it at once. Its surface had the color of something that had been buried underground for a long time. A pale, gray-brown, looking almost damp. The features were almost correct: 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, but they were arranged with the subtle wrongness of a face that was reconstructed from only seeing photographs. The eyes were too close together. The mouth was too wide and unnaturally flat, just a horizontal line that shifted slightly as she watched it. It wasn't opening or closing, just adjusting like a dial being calibrated. And the eyes didn't blink. They didn't move. They were fixed on a point in the air about 6 inches to her left. It wasn't looking at her. Priya sat completely frozen. She didn't scream, didn't move a muscle. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 40 seconds, it was gone. The next morning, she wrote down the one question that she said no one else had thought to ask. What does it want to learn from us? When she was asked to explain what she meant, she said, all the symptoms are sensory. The cold hands, the pressure in the ear. All the targeting is perceptual. Whatever this is, whatever is causing this, it's not trying to hurt us. It is trying to understand how we process information. It is treating us like instruments. She was told not to share that interpretation with anyone. She shared it with me, and I have been thinking about it ever since. Thank you for listening. The next account took me 3 months to verify. I kept waiting to find the part that didn't hold up. I'm still waiting. There is a particular kind of veteran who doesn't talk about what they've seen, not because they were told not to, but because they stopped believing anyone would understand. James Reas was that kind. 20 years Army intelligence, 2 tours, 1 classified deployment he references only by season and year. He retired to a 40-acre property outside Asheville, North Carolina. He raised chickens. He grew tomatoes. He was methodical and quiet, and he had done the work, he said, of becoming a person who didn't need much. He needed nothing from anyone. Until March 22 the chicken stopped laying in the first week. He noted it. Changed the feed. Checked for mold. Checked for stress indicators. By day 4, they had stopped moving normally. Not sick, not injured, but slow in a way that felt internal, like something had reduced their processing speed. He watched them for a long time. On the 6th day, they stopped making sound entirely. James had kept chickens for 9 years. He had never heard silence from his co-op. That night, the first headache arrived. Right side, immediately behind the eye. He had experienced significant pain in his life, and this was different from pain. It was specific, directional, it felt sourced. It felt like something aimed. He was outside the next morning at 4 a.m. with a rifle and a flashlight. He found nothing. But across the north field, in the wet soil along the fence line, he found impressions. Not animal tracks, impressions. Wide, irregular, spaced at intervals that suggested something massive moving with either great patience or great stillness between steps. He measured them. Each depression was roughly 28 inches across and 3 inches deep, in soil that would have required significant weight to compress. They ran along the fence line for approximately 60 feet and then stopped, not veered, not continued into the tree line. Stopped as if whatever made them had simply ceased to be at that point. He photographed them. He filed no report. He said, "I know what gets filed and what happens to it. Stay with me through this next part." 3 nights later, he saw it. It was in the far field, at the edge of his flashlight's range, maybe 90 feet out, standing in the open with the comfort of something that has no reason to hide. It was enormous, and it held itself wrong for its size, too still. The kind of stillness that belongs to something that doesn't need to breathe on a cycle. Its body was broadly cylindrical, wider at the midsection than at the shoulders, giving it a shape like something designed for pressure, like a figure made to withstand force from outside. Its surface caught the flashlight not with reflection, but with absorption, a quality of dark that seemed to pull at the beam rather than return it. Its head was small relative to the body, smooth, with no obvious facial features except for a slight protrusion at the center, like a single closed eye, centered slightly above where a nose might be. It did not move. He raised the rifle. At the moment the sight aligned with the figure, the headache became something different, not pain, but instruction. As clear as language. 2 words arriving not as sound but as knowledge. Put down. He lowered the rifle. He stood there for 6 minutes. The figure was gone on the 7th. James moved the chickens into the barn. They started laying again immediately. He told me he still goes out at 4 a.m. He still brings the rifle. He hasn't raised it since. Take a breath. James still goes out there every morning. He told me that himself. If you re-listening to this in the dark and some part of you understands why he keeps going, tell me in the comments. I'd like to know I'm not the only one. Stay with me for what comes next. I want to be careful with this one. The person at the center of it is still active. I've changed 2 details. Everything that matters is exactly as it was told to me. What comes next is the account that made me stop and sit in silence for a long time after reading it. I needed someone else to carry it with me. That's why you're here. A woman I'll call Anne had been with the NSC for 6 years when it happened. She was walking her dog, a medium-sized mutt named Biscuit, in the residential neighborhood where she lived, 3 blocks from work on an evening in November 2020, one day after the presidential election. She had done this walk 1,000 times. She was thinking, she said, about absolutely nothing in particular. That was the part she kept returning to. She was not stressed. She was not on a call. She was present, ordinary, emptied of urgency for the first time in 72 hours. Biscuit was pulling slightly at the leash toward a hedge. Then the air changed. Not the temperature, the quality. The way she described it, the air suddenly had direction. It was coming from somewhere specific, moving towards somewhere specific, and she was in its path. She turned in the direction it seemed to come from. There was nothing there. Biscuit went very still. The sound arrived 4 seconds later. She said it was not a sound you hear, it's a sound you are. Your entire skull becomes the speaker. There is no in or out. There is only this frequency, total, complete, for 4 seconds, and then it is gone. She stood on the sidewalk for 11 minutes. She did not know this until she checked her phone. Biscuit was sitting at her feet, facing back the way they'd come, trembling slightly, making no sound. She went inside. The headache arrived at 2 o'clock at p.m. By morning, she had lost 40% of the hearing in her right ear. She told me the hardest part wasn't any of that. The hardest part was looking out the window on the 6th night and seeing a figure standing in the gap between 2 houses across the street, facing the brick wall, impossibly tall, compressed inward like something that had been reduced to fit a space it didn't belong in, with arms that hung past where arms end and a head positioned far too high on a torso that barely existed. It had its back to her, and she stood there, watching it, and she thought, it has already been here a long time. Not because of anything it did, because of the way it stood. The patience of a thing that arrived before you started watching and will remain after you stop. The patience of a thing that is not waiting, only present, only arranged. On the 7th night, it was gone. She has not seen it since. But she told me she still doesn't walk Biscuit after dark. And she never walks that particular block. She said she made that rule before she understood why. She said she understood now. You've been in the dark long enough to have heard all of this. The accounts of Claire and Marcus and Priya and James and Anne and the others. Over 1,000 cases. Most of them still unresolved. Most of those people still waiting for an explanation they have quietly begun to stop expecting. What stays with me, at the end of all of it, is not the figures in the fields or the faces at the windows. It's the stillness. Every single account describes a thing that waits, that holds. That does not need to hurry. Whatever this is, wherever it comes from, it has all the time in the world. And the quiet in these stories, the silence between the sounds, is beginning to feel less like the absence of something and more like the sound of it listening back.